Hi, it's Money44 here, and today I would like to invite you to an episode about 3D printing in Airsoft. Today's episode is sponsored by Geek Buying, which provided the Anycubic Kobra 2 Pro printer. Since commercial 3D printers have been available, ideas for using 3D printing in Airsoft have appeared. And over the years, as printers have become easier to use and print faster, and the base of the materials from which to print has increased, the number of 3D printing projects has increased, growing day by day. I have been interested in 3D printing for years, and I have asked friends with printers for some of the prints I currently use. However, it's not the same as having your own device. So, because I wanted to be able to implement some of my ideas and I saw 3D printing as a solution to my problems, a year ago I bought my first 3D printer, the Anycubic Kobra 1. So let's just say I'm not completely new to the subject. However, the first generation Kobra had a big drawback for me, which was the printing time, which is why I didn't complete many projects. Waiting many hours for even small parts discouraged me, and printing large prints, let's say overnight, was completely out of the question for me. I am a person who doesn't like to leave devices unattended. I don't charge any batteries when I'm not at home, or I don't leave my computer to let something happen in the background. So running prints without my control, like when I was at work, was completely out of the question for me. When I received Kobra 2 Pro, the problem disappeared, because as you will see later, it is several times faster without losing print quality. And elements that previously would have been printed in say 15 hours, now print in 6 hours, and I'll also have full control over the print, even when I'm away. In today's material, we'll do a short review of the Anycubic Kobra 2 Pro printer, in which I will show you what we get with the printer, how it's assembled and built, and what the printer prints from it looks like. I will share with you my thoughts about the device and the problems I encountered, so I hope you will have a preliminary idea of what consumer devices look like today. After that, we'll move on to the parts strictly related to Airsoft. I will show you where to get models such as this one. I will mention the models that I have been using for a long time, and I will show you what I used to create my own project. The material itself is divided into two parts, a review of the printer and the parts strictly about 3D printing in Airsoft. I encourage you to watch both parts, but if you are interested in one more than in the other, the material will be divided into chapters. So let's start with the printer and a small unboxing. In a very large cardboard box filled with thick foam we'll find PEI steel plate, full instructions and shortened instructions, filament runout sensor, 4 GB pen drive with the necessary files, 10 meters of white PLA, extruder tubes and spare 0.4mm nozzle, tools needed for the assembly of the printer, and screws and other assembly parts. Power cable, arm with a Z-axis, spool holder, touchscreen, hot end with direct extruder, and the base of the printer along with the heated bed and all the electronics. As you probably guessed, the printer needs to be assembled, but it's not as scary as it may seem, and if you follow the instructions you can do it in half an hour. Simply screw the Z-axis to the base with 4 Allen screws. Put the PEI plate on the table, screw on the hot end, connect and mount the screen, plug in the filament guide tab and install the filament runout sensor, connect and organize the cabling. Before turning it on, make sure that the moving elements do not have too much play, and if necessary, correct it using the wrenches from the set. Now we can start the first launch. We can only choose between Chinese and English language. After selecting one and the ability to connect to the Wi-Fi network, which I will do later, we can proceed to the further steps, which will be informed on the touchscreen. After inserting the pen drive, the printer will perform a test. Then automatic table leveling will begin, along with the Z-offset calibration, that is the distance of the nozzle from the table. Anycubic Kobra 2 Pro has the Levic 2.0 system, which uses a magnetic sensor that detects the work table and thanks to 25 measurement point creates a three-dimensional mesh so that it knows in what position they are located, so there is no need to manually adjust the table height. After loading the filament, the next step is to calibrate the vibration compensation system, which is intended to improve the print quality, especially at high speeds. I recommend performing this calibration every time you move the printer to another place. After all that, we can print our first model prepared by Anycubic, in this case a shark-shaped bottle opener. It was printed in just over 11 minutes and I must say it turned out quite nicely as befit a print prepared by the manufacturer. I only noticed a slight underfill in the front part. The printer is assembled and working, so let's see what it offers. Anycubic Kobra 2 Pro is a FFF FDM printer that uses 1.75mm diameter filament to print. The working area of the printer is 250 to 220 to 220mm, and the table itself can heat up to the temperature of 110 degrees Celsius. The set includes, as I mentioned, a steel plate with a PEI coating, thanks to which the print sticks well to it during printing, and after they cool down there is no problem with removing them. According to the manufacturer, the printer is suitable for printing with materials such as PLA, PETG, ABS or TPU, which is probably due to the fact that the maximum nozzle temperature is 260 degrees Celsius. The printer has a direct extruder with double gears, which should ensure trouble-free operating with flexible materials such as the TPU, with which the Bowden extruders often have problems with. Anycubic declares the maximum print speed at 500mm per second and the standard one at 300mm per second. Maximum acceleration is 20,000mm per second. From the screen itself, when printing, we can choose between Sport, that is up to 500mm per second, Standard is our choice in the slicer, but for PLA is up to 300mm per second, and Stable, which is the slowest, but for which I have not found information on what the exact speed should be. The motherboard with silent drivers managed by the Cortex A7 processor is to be responsible for such speeds. We will analyze print at different speeds in a moment, but the printer itself sounds like this when working. The printer has a quite compact structure made of aluminum profiles. The Z-axis is moved by one motor, but two worm screws connected by a belt, which ensures equal movement of both sides of the arm on which the hot end is mounted. It moves on aluminum guides on a plastic wheels. The hot end itself moves on steel guides and steel wheels, which ensure failure-free operation at high speeds. The same applies to the table, which moves on two guides and steel wheels. Both axes have convenient belt tension adjustment. On the front there are three USB ports, one of which is prepared for working with webcam. Other important aspects of the printer are the touchscreen and network functions. From the screen we can select prints from the printer's memory, which has approximately 7 GB of available space. It does not matter whether we print from the cloud or a pen drive, the model will be copied to the internal memory. In the tools we have access to the manual heating of the table and the nozzle to the required temperature or cooling them, functions useful when replacing the filament, and access to the calibration functions that we perform during the first startup. In the last menu we can turn off the filament sensor, move each axis, fan functions, connection to the Anycubic cloud, support with QR codes, possibility to turn off the touch sound, time until the screen turns off, nozzle PID calibration, first startup procedure, language, device information, export logs, and restoring to the factory settings. During printing we can also change the temperature of the table and the nozzle, speed to one of the previously mentioned modes, Z-offset, that is the height of the nozzle from the table, fan speed, and turn off the filament runout sensor. We can also pause printing or cancel it. As I mentioned earlier, the printer also has a phone app through which we can connect to the printer and control it. We can download models directly through the application and send it to the printer or monitor the current printing. And if we connect a webcam to the printer, we can also have a live preview. The camera I connected for the test is very bad, hence the ugly image, but the printer is supposed to work with most irregular USB cameras available on the market. Since everything goes through Anycubic servers, we don't have to be on the same network, so remotely, like from work, we can see if everything is okay and stop printing if necessary. I decided to do a small test and print 2 models at each speed using the iBoss PLA Plus filament to show you the difference in the print time and quality. For this purpose, I installed the latest software and went through all the calibration steps, but I did not correct anything myself, so that you can see what a person who turned on the printer for the first time could expect. The first to go was the standard 20mm calibration cube, which was printed in about 22 minutes in stable mode, in only about 12 minutes in the standard mode, and in less than 10 minutes in sport mode. For comparison, on my Kobra 1 it will take about 28 minutes. When it comes to the quality of the prints, I can honestly say that I don't see any significant difference, and the only thing that can be observed are difference in the color caused by the fact that I printed at the same temperature but different speeds and, let's face it, different cooling times. There are no big differences in terms of dimensions, and for me they are okay. The second choice was the popular Davinci, a bot created for testing the quality of 3D prints. For the stable speed, I prepared my own file, which I printed in about 51 minutes. For the standard speed, I used a ready-made model from Anycubic, which printed in about 28 minutes, and for the sport mode, I used another ready-made model from the Anycubic, which printed in a record time of about 15 minutes. For comparison, the same model on my old printer would print in 1 hour and 55 minutes at the speed of 60mm per second. Even with such a complicated model, I did not notice any significant loss of quality. All the details look very similar, and apart from the more sagging lines in the front window in the case of the fastest print, and the difference in the color of the filament, I have nothing to complain about the print. In these parameters, the printer, so to speak, prints straight off the box, in my opinion, very good. And the only thing I could improve now is to raise the nozzle a bit, because it creates so-called elephant's foot, that is, the model is widened at the bottom, and increase the flow, the speed of the fat filament, because in some places you can see a gap between the walls. But like many things in the 3D printing, it's the user fault and not the printer's. In my opinion, these are the most important features of the printer that will be important for people who simply want to set up the printer and print. However, there is an aspect that may be important for so-called power users, namely the fact that the printer cannot be connected via USB to a computer, and the printer cannot be managed from there using programs such as the ProntFace or Octoprint. For some people this may be important, because for this reason it's not possible to perform additional calibrations of the printer operation to fine-tune it, so to speak. Personally, it doesn't bother me much. My printer has already worked for over 60 hours and I'm happy with how it prints, and I don't feel the need to dig into it anymore. But for some people it may be important information, that's why I'm mentioning it. The second thing is the nozzle, which have a slightly non-standard shape and were introduced by Anycubic along with the Kobra 2 line. The nozzles are becoming more and more easily available, but please remember that there are not standard volcano nozzles, but dedicated nozzles with a color for the Kobra 2 series. Problems may arise with 3D printing, and while the PLA or PLA Plus I use is a material that forgives many mistakes, I did have some of them and it's partly my fault. The first problem I had was a problem with slicer. With Kobra 1 I always use Cura, which worked great, but after downloading profiles from Anycubic to Kobra 2 Pro, there were problems. The prints were very ugly and the nozzle kept hitting the infill, tearing it into pieces. I solved the problem by using Perso Slicer, which works great with the Anycubic profiles, and I slice all prints with it. Another problem I noticed was the models falling off the table. In Kobra 1 I cleaned the table with isopropyl alcohol every few prints and the prints always stuck beautifully, but here it didn't work, so I lost a lot of filament on failed prints. I also couldn't figure out what was causing the problems, because IPA always worked great with Kobra 1, and only after washing the table with Protect soap, even small prints without the brim turned on printed perfectly and did not come off the table, regardless of the printing speed. What do I ultimately think about the Anycubic Kobra 2 Pro? Personally, I'm very satisfied. I do not have any extreme high requirements when it comes to the print quality, and mechanical properties are slightly more important to me than any minor imperfections. And since I make my prints mainly for my use, I have no problem with manually correcting minor errors. I'm not saying this because the printer prints poorly. On the contrary, it had no problem with printing, for example, threads on the barrel extension, which without any major problems can be screwed many times with the plastic thread on the replica or the aluminum thread in the second extension. So the quality straight from the box is absolutely spot on. Since I print mainly with PLA, PLA Plus or TPU, the lack of the other technical filaments does not bother me. I know the limitations of these materials and when to use them, and if necessary the possibility of printing PETG or better yet IBS gives me a certain opportunity to use more durable filaments. I certainly like how easy it was to turn on the printer and how it prints in standard settings. Its printing speeds and the fact that it connects via an application to the phone with the option to view the print live via a webcam. The only thing I would like is an application for my computer. So for who is the printer for? In my opinion, it's for someone who just wants to set up the device, load the filament and print at very nice speeds. As with any equipment, I recommend delving into the topic of 3D printing, read about slicers, filament types, the most common problems and their solutions. Because no matter how easy the printer is to use, without this knowledge you will quickly do something wrong and problems will begin. They may discourage you from the 3D printing, which is in my opinion a really great thing. If you're interested in the Anycubic Kobra 2 Pro printer, you can find it among others from the sponsor of today's episode, that is Geek Buying. You will find a link to it in the video description. And now I would like to invite you to the part of the episode strictly about Airsoft. Airsoft is constantly developing, new products are being created and with them new problems often arise, which cannot always be easily solved because there are simply no parts or solutions available. In such a case, 3D printing can help us, among other things. Models are often available for free on the internet and solve various problems or add functionality like to the replicas. You need a wrist rail for a replica that doesn't have one? Someone has already thought about it. Maybe an unusual silencer or a holster for an unusual replica or something simpler like a tool to make it easier to load magazines. The internet is full of models that you just need to download, put them in the slicer of your choice and simply print them out. Of course, it doesn't end with small items, because what would you say about, for example, a conversion for a given replica or even a project from scratch to which all you need is install a gearbox and a barrel with a chamber. Such things are also available on the internet, sometimes for free, but most of the time for a small charge. And such example is the PDDR9, which is a conversion to the AAP01 that turns it into a ballpop replica. The conversion on the Anycubic Kobra 2 Pro that you saw in the first part of the material took about 32 hours to print, which is not a bad result, because on the Kobra 1 it would have been 67 hours. I used just over a kilogram of filament on it and I just had to buy some few screws and nuts and do some file fitting and it's ready. The old AAP I didn't use much got a new life. In a moment you will see, I will show you how the conversion is built, but first let's see on which website you can look for Airsoft models. The first website that I often use is Thingiverse from Multimaker. On the website you will find a lot of free projects, often very similar to each other because the website allows you to remix models, that is, modification by other users. I have collected a lot of various small items from here and I have never been disappointed. The second website that I often use, from which the PDDR model is Golds3D. There are many free models on this website, but many more paid ones, with prices starting from couple of €. The database of Airsoft model itself is very large, especially for individual replica models, and if you're looking for a nice conversion for a replica, I think you'll find it here. Let's see some examples of ready-made models that I often use. It happens to me more than once that I needed to be able to place a replica in front of the camera, for in which case a simple stand for a replica from the AR-15 family may come in handy. Not everyone likes the appearance of the camera on the replica. For this reason, someone designed a casing for the camera that turns it into something like a D-bell. You may know the model from one of the arena videos when I had it mounted on the camera. In the P90 there is a lot of space for the battery, but I still didn't have enough. Luckily someone made an enlarged butt plate. It fits perfectly and allows me to install the battery without any problems. I really like those pistol magazine loading aids. They allow you to conveniently lock the spring down and load the magazine, and there is no problem finding them for various types of magazines. Speaking of magazines, if you need to carry magazines to the electric pistol, you know that is not an easy task. In this case, such a simple insert for pistol pouches helped me. Sometimes it's hard to get a holster for some replicas, and 3D printing can also help here. This model for the MK23 was additionally modified by my friend, who added among other things my logo on it. I had the holster itself for several years, and despite several collisions with the walls, it's still fine. Staying on the subject of holsters, at the time when these mounts were hard to find in Poland, a friend of mine printed them out and few plates for me, so I could quickly change holsters. Over time I printed another plate myself, and despite several years of use, I don't see anything wrong with it. I also once printed such a wrist adapter for the MK23. Due to the fact that my slide was slightly damaged in this place, the adapter held poorly and I didn't use it, but it would work on a functional slide and maybe with a bit of glue. From less airsoft related things, it's worth mentioning this model of a filament cleaner. It consists of two parts, but it's printed as one element and the hinge is internal. There is enough space between the parts that the parts can move without any problems, just like these sharks. They are printed as one element and the segments just need to be spread apart. This shows the possibilities of 3D printing. Now let's look at the conversion to the AAP, the PTDR9. It consists of 14 parts. From the body, through the front ring with the thread, barrel extension, to the links, pistol grip and key mod front. Some of the oversized parts are split like the body itself, where I had to glue the halves together with epoxy glue. Apart from that, some parts, such as the magazine release, are held on 2mm steel rods, and the rest is fastened with screws. The print has the advantage that you can embed brass inserts into them to be able to screw the screws firmly into the elements. And this model, apart from this insert to the trigger, several are also included in the body. Kobra 2 Pro prints so well that I had no problems with screwing the printed thread into both the plastic thread in the AAP and the aluminum thread in the next extension. Because as you can see, I extended the barrel in the replica and have to cover it with something. However, sometimes it's necessary to adjust some elements to each other, so I had to make a little more space for the pistol grip and slim down the bolt link. After that, all that was left to do was to put everything together, and I can test the operation on a magazine with blocked feeder, so that the slide does not get stuck in the rear position. The model does not have access to the magazine release, so when it's empty the slide will remain in the back. Overall, I'm very satisfied with the entire project. There are some places that I could have done better, but I have no objections to the model itself. I plan to use the replica in this form with a HPA adapter and straight MP5 magazines, thanks to which I will have a lot of ammunition and I will not have to worry about gas consumption. Additionally, I will be able to adjust its power as needed. Ready-made models are great, but for me the real fun started when I started designing my own things. I looked at various free programs for this, but finally I decided on Onshape, a free program that runs through a browser in a cloud, which also works on a phone or tablet, and to be honest, it probably has more functions than I currently need. One of the things you may know from my Insta is an insert for the rifle pouches for Spetsna X magazines, that allows me to conveniently carry these magazines without changing pouches. A minor inconvenience that I solved with 3D printing. Another thing that I have been doing more lately is covers for sights. Printing with PLA sometimes makes it difficult to find exact dimensions. A flexible TPU would be better for this, but this is another project that I was able to design quite quickly and conveniently solve this problem. When I was going to the blast, one of the requirements for DMR replicas was to have a bipod. I didn't want to invest in something I wouldn't use, so I decided to adapt the bipod from M249 to the wrist rail. One afternoon of designing later, I had a ready adapter that not only allowed me to mount the bipod to the replica, but also gave me its full functionality. Apart from copying the original, I had to add the wrist mount to it and that's it. For the same game, I wanted to wear a brooch with the seal of my faction that was the Blood Brotherhood. So I took the image of the faction logo, traced the seal itself and made a 3D model of it. Added a safety pin and some red paint and it's ready. In the same way, I also made keychains with my logo, because why not? One of the next projects was a mount for a replaceable glass lens for my camera. This is where 3D printing showed its potential, because I wasn't sure which solution would work best, so I was able to make several different versions of the design very quickly to finally choose the best one. Since Kobra 2 Pro prints very quickly, on the same day I printed spare mount, which I can always have with me along with spare glass. Another problem that I quickly solved with print was the broken assembly for the Veno X. I designed my slightly wider and more durable motor dedicated to Molly and the problem was generally solved. After replacing the gearbox shell in my Spetsna X, I could not use the standard board release from it, but I liked the design. half an hour of work and I have the dummy bolt released in similar design. 3D printing can of course be combined with other materials. This way I eliminated a certain inconvenience when shooting shots of the tabletop like what you see now. I created a dedicated camera mount for the cabinet above the desk, consisting of 2 print parts and a wooden plank. The GoPro standard camera mount allows me to mount a holder that I can adjust, and on it I have a Arca Swiss mount for the camera. On the other side there is a large mount that fits under the shelf. The distance of the camera from the cabinet is even adjustable. And I made a guide itself using 3D printed tool, thanks to which I was able to drill holes evenly, because apart from the drill I had no other tool. Another print of this type is my stand for the Cessna X types replicas, consisting of the stand itself, which is glued to a piece of a foam PVC with side stiffeners from the print, plus my sticker, and that's it. You could have seen this stand in the last review of the Zion Arms replica. You're probably wondering how durable such prints are. There are many different variables. What material we will use, how many external walls the print has, what infill we use. PLA is hard but also brittle material. PLA Plus is slightly better when in case, but not great. I have this holster for the MK23 for a long time and nothing is wrong with it. The same with quick connectors for holsters, but there are printers with 100% infill. In the case of more empty prints it may different. Here on the failed conversion print, I took the liberty of firing a few shots from my replica with power of about 1 joule, and as you can see the model gave up completely in thinner places, and visible dents were created in thicker ones. As you can see, 3D printing has many applications in Airsoft, from small elements that make certain activities easier, through elements that add additional functions to the replica, to either entire replicas or their conversions. And in fact, this is only a tip of the iceberg, and it depends on you what you will use it to do. Would I recommend buying a 3D printer for anyone? Probably not. Despite the significant development of the technology in recent years, 3D printing is still something you need to practice and prepare for, otherwise you can get into a lot of problems. Besides, at least in my opinion, if you don't plan to learn how to design yourself and you only want to use ready-made models, you will run out of things to print quite quickly. And believe me, designing is not that difficult. There are plenty of guides available on the YouTube for one shape, which I use, from which I learned myself, and there are plenty of other free programs, so there is plenty to choose from. Once you learn a little about design, you will soon find out that you can solve various minor problems, not only in Airsoft, but also in everyday life. Additionally, 3D printing can become your additional source of income. If you come up with a product that fills a certain niche, such as a previously presented Veno, which is produced using 3D printing. Or you create a fantastic HPA adapter, such as a Prism 3D, which I use myself. And even if you don't want to print anything yourself, you can sell models on, let's say, Code 3D. In my case, 3D printing has already solved several problems and gave me the opportunity to create projects that I would not normally think about because I don't have the appropriate tools to make them otherwise. If you're interested in 3D printing, I have some advice for you regarding choosing a printer. First of all, you need to ask yourself what you will print and in what conditions you will use it. There are many filaments with different properties and printing requirements. The next thing is the size of the model. If you want to print really large models, it's worth looking for a printer with a larger working area than the Kobra 2 Pro, presented today, like Kobra 2 Max. There are ways to divide the model into smaller elements to print them in parts, but this is an additional problem, and then it's also you need to be glued together. It's worth considering what additional functions the printer should have. Automatic table leveling is slowly becoming a standard, but do we need, for example, to connect it to a computer? Whether it should be able to connect via network, or even have a built-in camera to control prints with AI functions, as in the case of the Bumble apps, or multicolor printing. And of course, how much we can spend. The 3D printer market is changing really quickly, and a month, 3 or half a year after the premiere of this video, it may turn out that there are much better models available at the same price as the Kobra 2 Pro presented today. So it's worth keeping your finger on the pulse. That's all for today. Let me know if you liked today's episode, which was slightly different from purely Airsoft content, and what do you think about 3D printing in Airsoft. And for now, thanks for watching and see you next time.